Since the community seemed to enjoy my CK3 Chapter 2 review, I decided to go back and review the Chapter 1 DLC bundle, which Paradox released from September 2020 to May of 2022. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that time span in a second, don't worry, but first, an anomaly. When looking at pricing for the sake of this video, I noticed that both the Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 DLC packs seem to no longer be available as individual packs for sale on Steam, which itself is odd, considering the last dev diary literally confirmed we were getting a Chapter 3 DLC pack, so I don't know why Paradox would hide or forcibly bundle the two instead of keeping them separate. Keep in mind this is all as of December 2023 when I wrote this script, so things could change between now and when this releases in early January. Regardless, you can get these bundles as a collected Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 pack, which will cost you around $143 US. Personally, I would not recommend this to a new player or anyone really, because buying DLC wholesale is almost never a good idea. You usually end up paying more money, and you might not even want all the DLC included. This is where people like myself come in to tell you whether or not you should buy a DLC in the first place, but that's neither here nor there. There is another bundle you can get, the Royal Edition as it's called, which contains all the Chapter 1 DLC and the base game for $74.99 US. Seeing as CK3 is as of right now $49.99 retail, according to the Paradox website and Steam, that would put the Chapter 1 pack at around $25 US with this bundle. Now, considering the pack, which you can only get individually, otherwise costs a whopping $55.97 US and only includes 3 of the 4 items, this is a pretty good deal. However, there doesn't seem to be a way to get the bundle without getting the base game too, at least from what I could see. So unless you've yet to jump into CK3, I would probably ignore basically everything I just said and not get this either. Therefore, for the sake of this review, we'll be looking at the value of the pack based on the $55.97 price tag, and the fact you can only get the cosmetic pack with one of the far more expensive bundles. So with this in mind, the 3 DLC cost an average of $18.66 US, which means there's already a pretty significant uphill battle for them from here. Almost $19 is a lot to ask for any DLC from any game, let alone from Crusader Kings. For reference, at the time of their release, The Witcher 3's DLC Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine cost a total of $24.99 USD. Now they cost about $29.99, but that's still a pretty good deal for 2 DLC that add probably about as much time as the base game did. For a more contemporary example, Cyberpunk 2077's Phantom Liberty cost about $29.99 and also added a ton of new content. Now these are DLC which add hours and hours of gameplay and features to their respective games, and while I recognize these aren't the same kind of game at all, if the DLC average price is going to cost almost as much as some of the best DLC to come out in the last decade, then they better be great and of comparative value. But unfortunately, that's quite far from the case, at least for Chapter 1. This probably goes without saying, but don't expect this review to be nearly as positive as my Chapter 2 one was. I like Paradox a lot, and I think they learned a ton about how they implemented Chapter 1, i.e. that they did a horrible job and have since learned how to massively improve. But that doesn't and won't excuse what we got over the course of 20 months. No, I'm not going to ignore that time frame, and yes, it's time to talk about it. Chapter 1, which consisted of 4 total DLC, released over 20 months. For reference, and again, while considering it is a slightly less complicated game, CK2 had about 6 DLC in this time frame. But these weren't flavor packs, cosmetic packs, or whatever. These were all expansions. Also keep in mind that while yes, the Friends and Foes event pack released shortly after Fate of Iberia in August of 2022, that was not and was never advertised as part of Chapter 1. Instead, here are the following DLC that are considered part of Chapter 1, their release date, and their current USD pricing. Also, for anyone wondering where I'm getting my information, I'm going to link the Paradox Wiki, which will explain all of this and is where I got most of my stuff from. Anyway, Chapter 1's DLC were the Cosmetic Pack Fashion of the Abbasid, which released September 1st, 2020, and is currently only available with the CK3 Royal Bundle or the Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 DLC bundle. The Flavor Pack Northern Lords, which released May 16th, 2021 and cost $12.99. The expansion Royal Court, which released nearly a year later on February 8th, 2022, and it cost $29.99. And finally, the second Flavor Pack, Fate of Iberia, which released May 31st, 2022 and cost $12.99. So 4 total DLC, with only 3 being available if you wanted to buy them outside of a much more expensive bundle. Okay, not looking great so far, but what about the DLC themselves? Specifically, what do they add to the game? That's what we're here for, and that's what we're going to begin talking about with the cosmetic pack and going on from there. So Fashion of the Abbasid Court it's a nothing DLC, full stop. It's literally just a cosmetic pack which adds some clothing to the Middle Eastern and Northern African cultures. If you're familiar with this channel, then you probably know how much I loathe this kind of DLC not being a free update or being included in a bundle in any kind anyway. Why you would even include this by name in Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 is beyond me. It feels like padding for your DLC number, which is how I'm going to view it. All cosmetic packs are an instant F on an A to F scale, but this is doubly so considering you can't even get it without buying the Chapter 1 bundle, which you also can't get. So you have to buy the more expensive bundles I mentioned earlier. So there, Quick and easy, a big fat F for fashion, I guess. Our second and first true DLC was Northern Lords, which again, if you know this channel, then you know I'm actually quite fond of. This flavor pack, the first of its now extinct kind, as of the most recent dev diary, which has replaced them with core expansions, but we're not going to talk about that here, added loads of new features pertaining to the Northern Europe region and cultures. These include adventuring, which allowed the AI and players to go on adventures to go to far-off lands and conquer duchies or other lands to settle new homes, shield maidens to add to your knight ranks and become potential wives or concubines, new dynastic legacies, sacrifices, trials by combat, epic poems, original art and music, new men-at-arms, traits like berserkers, runestones, and many, many more events and decisions. Most popular among these would probably be the ability to play as one of the Sons of Ragnar, with their unique decision trees as the great heathen army rolls into Britain to avenge their father's death, or perhaps it was just like most other people have been playing as everyone's favorite Jarl Haystein, who is the most positively broken character in the game and only improved with the adventure perk. This DLC was quite robust and added a lot, as I already said. For a long time, even though it was the first major DLC for CK3, this was probably the best one, and I think that remains true even in retrospect. I would personally rate it just behind Tours and Tournaments, which I would rate just behind Legacy of Persia, so about third out of all the other DLCs. It's a wonderful and well thought out expansion that enhances the experience to something most people would argue is better than most other areas in the game. Needless to say, Northern Lords for me gets an A+. I loved it then, and I still love it now. I know some people say it's shallow, but every time I play in that region, I could not disagree with that sentiment more. Its additions feel so vital to the experience that I consider this a must-buy. Seriously, if you don't own it and you play CK3, I consider it a must-get right now. Our third DLC was Royal Court, which released almost half a year after Northern Lords, but not quite. This was CK3's first expansion-sized DLC and added the throne room, the ability to hold court, the grandeur mechanic, the court positions, I think, inspirations and artifacts, hybrid cultures, and cultural divergence. I'll be real, I really didn't like this DLC, and I still don't really like it, but especially when it released. Royal Court has the potential to be very interesting, true, and I do like some of its features like the ability to diverge cultures, make hybrid cultures, and even to improve your throne room. It's a fun little mechanic, and I like somewhere to put my mountains of stuff. However, the whole court mechanic is bad. Most of the decisions are basically instant money or prestige loss, and they never really feel like they're worth your time. I think anyone who's played a lot of CK3 like myself or many of the other creators on this platform largely ignore the features of the court and only really interface with the artifacts or maybe the core positions, and most specifically the cultural upgrade facet. I won't say it's a bad DLC because I truthfully don't think it is, but the fact that it costs $30, the same as the Blood and Wine or the Cyberpunk DLCs, is insane to me. We lambast CA for their DLC pricing, but what about this $30 price tag? That's insane. It should never have been listed as an expansion, and I would never personally pay full price for this pack for what you get. The only reason I even own it was because I bought the Chapter 1 bundle, which I don't even remember the price of anymore because I can't go back and check. Hey there guys, Editor Soul here. Real quick, I actually did find a picture, which I'm going to put on screen right now, for the Chapter 1 pack. I'm not sure if this was the exact pricing, but from what I can tell, it cost about $34.69 for the bundle at the time of its release, which I would have considered a pretty good deal at the time. So that sort of just goes to show that the $29.99 price tag of the Royal Court was frankly ridiculous. This is one I'd 100% either skipping or getting on sale, and I'd give it personally a D rating. It isn't bad, it's actually pretty average. It adds some things I like, but the key features of it, the holding of and having court, are just so meh that I just don't mess with them, and I don't really think they're necessary to increase your experience. It's such a small update in comparison to the second expansion, Tours and Tournaments, and I can only imagine how small it's going to feel in comparison to what I speculate to be the government system-wide expansion in Chapter 3. So yeah, Royal Court, it's bad. The final DLC in the Chapter 1 bundle was Fate of Iberia, which released just a couple months after Royal Court. This mainly added the ever-controversial struggle mechanic that was the hugely advertised thing, which is a multi-stage, multifaceted warfare enhancer, which allows for more dynamic wars, where many individual rulers and cultures vie for domination over a specific region. This was made in hopes of expanding the complexity of those wars to more than just, this is my casus belli, you're on my land, I win. Honestly, this was the biggest part of the DLC by far, as the Fate of Iberia, to do a title drop, was tied directly to the struggle and to ending it. However, the DLC did also add new decisions, events, clothing, armor, hair, 3D models, holding ships, and new units, and all the other stuff that a lot of the other cultural packs used to get for CK2. But truthfully, outside of the struggle mechanic, this DLC added a lot more visual things than I would say mechanical things. Where I like the struggle personally, I won't deny that it's a bit of a pain to end and prone to being overly complicated and frustrating for a lot of players. I much prefer how it was implemented in Legacy of Persia. However, we should consider that the Reconquista happened over several hundred years, so it does make sense that it would be difficult. Still, it didn't feel like a DLC that added enough beyond the struggle to justify itself. It was a little too half-baked and an idea they would clearly revisit in Legacy of Persia and improve on in virtually every way, which is why I love Legacy of Persia. Where I technically gave that DLC an S rating, or an A+, because this is an A to F scale, I would probably give Fate of Iberia maybe a firm C. It's a good concept, and I do like being able to flesh out the events and characters of that region, because it's one of my favorite in history, but I can't deny that the struggle mechanic has remained a widely divisive feature in the community a year and a half since its release, and I don't expect that to change because it seems like a model they're going to repeatedly come back to, so I don't know if the Legacy of Fate of Iberia is going to be a good one. So with an F, A+, D, and C rating, and with keeping in mind that the F should probably be weighted as a flavor pack C considering it's a cosmetic pack, then I would say the Chapter 1 bundle would probably rate about a C, but for me I'm going to drop it down to a D+, considering how long it took for most of the DLC to come out, and for the fact that 2 of the DLC, Fate of Iberia and Royal Court, did too little, in my opinion, to deliver on their promises and price point, especially Royal Court, which I imagine will probably remain the worst expansion in CK3's canon even years from now. It just wasn't a good pack, and if you notice, the only DLC I even recommended wholesale was Northern Lords, and that's still true. If you can pick the other ones up on 50% off sales, then sure, I'd say go for it, but I would never, under any circumstance, tell anyone to buy Fate of Iberia or Royal Court at full price. It just doesn't feel justified to me. Thankfully, with Chapter 2, we got a lot better DLC, and with Chapter 3 teasers, it seems we're going to be heading in the right direction still. I really love CK3, and I really love Paradox, and I want to see them both succeed, and I truly do believe the developers are taking the steps in the right direction by listening to the community and taking strides to do what they're asking for rather than make DLC that sort of seems confusing and maybe not necessarily what anyone wants. But again, as we take one last look back at where we came from in terms of expanded content, it's not hard to see why people criticize the developers. One good DLC in almost 2 years is simply inexcusable, let's be real, for a company who models themselves off continued DLC and continued support. But again, Paradox seems to have recognized that error, and I'm hopeful for the future. But that's going to be it for this one. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you like this one as much as you liked my Chapter 2 DLC review, and of course I will be doing a Chapter 3 DLC review when that chapter concludes releasing. I'll also probably be doing individual ones because, you know, I gotta get that YouTube money! Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, as it helps me and YouTube know that you like my content and would like to continue to see more of it. If you do like my content and would like to support me in other ways, you can always become a channel member. There are 2 levels, which you can see here. These are our channel members who I would like to appreciate for being here and for supporting the channel. If you'd like to become one, you can check out the perks in the Join tab. I'm Soul. This has been a CK3 review video, and I will happily see you in the next one.